Hello everyone, welcome back to another problem tutorial from our Chapter 4 tutorial series for Financial Management course, BUS 223. In this video we're going to be looking at problem number 16, which is a very interesting problem. So let's read it together. It says a firm has a long-term debt to equity ratio of 0.4. Shareholders' equity is 1 million. Current assets are 200,000 and the current ratio is 2. The only current liabilities are notes payable. What is the total debt ratio? So this is what we want to figure out, but we do have to find a few things before we do that. Okay, the total debt ratio is calculated by dividing the total liabilities over the total assets. But we want to find these components before we can do that, okay? So let's use the information that is given to us, and from that we can find our total debt ratio, all right? So to start off, we know that the long-term debt to equity ratio is 0.4, right? And the shareholders' equity is 1 million. Right, so from there we can derive our long-term debt, right? So we want to find the long-term debt. We'll use the debt to equity ratio formula. Let's call it long-term. Let me move this away. Right here. Long-term debt to equity, which is going to be the long-term debt divided by shareholders' equity. Okay. Now this is already given to us to be 0.4, right? So 0.4 equals long-term debt divided by the shareholders' equity, which is 1 million. All right. Now to find the long-term debt, we're just going to mathematically play around with this formula, do a cross multiplication, because here we assume that we have 1. We'll multiply that by the long-term debt, and we'll multiply the 0.4 by the shareholders' equity of 1 million, right? So that will give me 0.4 multiplied by 1 million is going to equal the company's long-term debts. All right. Turn to our calculators. 0.4 multiplied by 1 million, and that is $400,000. Okay, so now we know what is the company's long-term debt. All right. Now, we also know the current assets of the company, and we know the current ratio, but we don't know the current liabilities of the company. So we can, again, use this information given to us to calculate our way back from the current ratio, knowing the current assets, to find the current liabilities. All right? So, quickly remind ourselves of the current ratios formula. Current ratio equals current assets divided by current liabilities. Okay, and the current ratio is given to us here, 2. So I'll substitute here with 2, and the current assets are $200,000. So $200,000 here at the top. I still need to know the current liabilities. Again, using cross multiplication, we can rearrange our equation and it will become 2 multiplied by current liabilities equals $200,000. Okay, and we want this term to be alone on this one side and have everything else on the other side. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this and move it to the other side, having or knowing that 2 times the current liabilities equals 200,000. This means that current liabilities will equal 200,000 divided by 2, right? Which means that current liabilities equals 100,000. Okay? All right. Now, we have the company's current liabilities and long-term debts, right? So we have the current liabilities and non-current liabilities. We can combine these two together and know the company's total debt. All right? Okay. So we'll go and write our formula for total debt. Total debt ratio equals total liabilities over total assets. Okay, remember this is what the question actually wants right here. It says, what is the total debt ratio? Okay, so the total debt ratio is calculated using this formula. Now we already found the short-term liabilities, the current liabilities, and the long-term debts, so we can combine them. That was 400,000 and 100,000. Plus 400,000. Okay. And the total assets is not given to us in the question, but we know from the basic accounting equation, okay, that assets equals total liabilities plus shareholders' equity. Right? And because we already know the company's total liabilities and the shareholders' equity was given to us in the question right here, so now we can know that for the denominator here of our formula, it's going to be 500,000, which is the total liabilities, same as what we have at the top here, plus 1,500,000. Oh, sorry, 1 million. My bad. $1 million, which is the shareholders' equity that is given to us in the question right here. Shareholders' equity is 1 million. All right. So this means our total debt ratio is going to equal 500,000 divided by 1.5 million. Okay. And that equals 1/3. by 1,500,000, 1 over 3, which is equal to 0.33. Alright, which is what's required in the question. So this is the total debt ratio. Alright, I hope that you found the exercise clear. Again, to quickly remind you, what is required in the question? What's required in the question is to find the total debt ratio. Okay? Now, from what we've learned, to calculate the total debt ratio, we need to apply this formula. Total liabilities over total assets. Okay? But unfortunately, those numbers are not given to us directly in the question. So if the question gave us the total liabilities and the total assets right away, we can just apply this, the formula for this ratio and find it out, right? But it's not given, so we need to find a few things. So what we've done is we used the long-term debt to equity formula right here to find the long-term debt, because it was given to us in the question that the long-term debt to equity ratio is 0.4. Okay, so we took advantage of this piece of information to find, okay, so if the long-term debt to equity is 0.4, and I know that this ratio is calculated by dividing the long-term debt over the shareholders' equity, then I can apply the ratio and work my way backwards to find what's the long-term debt for the company, which we figured out to be 400,000. Okay? Now we know the long-term debt for the company, we need the short-term or the current liability. We have another piece of information here that tells us that the company's current ratio is 2 and their current assets is 200,000. So again, we took advantage of this piece of information, knowing that the current ratio is calculated by dividing the current assets by the current liabilities. And since we know that the current ratio of the company is 2, and we know that their current assets is 200,000, we can apply the ratio and work or play around with the formula to find the current liabilities, which turned out to be 100,000. Okay? Knowing these two, now we can put them together and we assume this is the company, the company's total liabilities. Consists of a short-term component and a long-term component. Okay? So with this, we have all we need for the top figure. For the bottom, for the total assets, we have no way from the data given in the question to find what's the total assets. But we know from the basic accounting equation that the total assets of a company equal its total liabilities plus its shareholders' equity. And we know this from what we have calculated right here, right? These two together. And we know this from the data in the question right here. Shareholders' equity is 1 million. So we put them together and we have the total assets of the company. All right? After knowing all of the inputs that we need for calculating the ratio, it's easy for us to just apply the total debt ratio and run the numbers and find what's required to answer the question. Okay. I hope that you found the video useful. This is how you can solve problem number 16. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to drop them down in the comments. And until I see you in the next problem tutorial, keep on learning, and I wish you the best of luck.